So now I want you to try to imagine, what would a totally unbiased mind look like? See, your mind is biased. We've established that, I hope. I hope you're honest enough to admit that to yourself. But what would, try to imagine a mind that is completely unbiased. Try to imagine what it would be like for you to drop all of these biases we've been talking about. For your children, and for the temperature, and for your sports team to win, and all this sort of stuff. Drop all of it. For your favorite food, drop all your biases. How do you think you'd feel? See, part of the problem here is that you're not even conscious of all of your biases yet. So when I tell you to drop them, it's hard for you to even imagine it because you don't even know what your biases are, other than the ones I've here made explicit. But you have way more than that. I can't tell you all your biases. That's some work you got to do yourself. Because selfishness is blindness to one's own biases. That's what selfishness is. If you were conscious of all of your biases and the consequences of them on your life, you would drop them. The reason you don't drop them is, A, you're not conscious of them at all, and you're busy defending and justifying them so thoroughly that you're completely blind to them. And two, you're not conscious of all the consequences, and you don't have enough consciousness to see how it's going to boomerang on you. If you cleared that up by raising your consciousness, you would drop many of your biases. To a point. There are limits. We'll discuss those in a minute. So the absolute truth is that all biases are existentially arbitrary and meaningless. They don't have any reality. No objective reality to them. All biases are subjective. All value and meaning is relative and imaginary. And as a result, God does not have any biases. So one definition of what is God, people sometimes wonder, there are many ways to define what God is, very profound ways, but here's one that we're going to focus on in this episode. I've given you many definitions elsewhere, but this one is specific to this episode. Well, actually, I've talked about it a bit elsewhere too, but anyways, God is a mind that has absolutely no biases. That's profound. Think about that. And try to draw some connections with you. What this means for you. What I mean, if God is a mind that has no biases, and your mind right now, your human mind, has a bunch of biases, then the only difference between your mind and God's mind is literally your biases. So if you drop all of your biases, guess what? You become God. Ta-da! This is, I'm describing the gateway to God to you here. But Leo, where is this magical God you talk about? This is so new agey and so woo-woo and all this sorts of shit. I want to see this God. Prove to me that this God is real. But if God is nothing other than a mind which has absolutely no biases, and yet your mind is so full of fucking biases, how can God be proven to you? Even your demand for a materialistic proof or a rationalistic proof, can you see how that itself is a bias? That's the mindfuck here. Be intelligent. I'm telling you something very profound. You can access the mind of God, but only if you drop all your biases. Especially all the ones you don't want to drop. Especially rationality, especially science. And now you say, but Leo, if I drop my science and my rationality, then what's the point even? Then there's not even a point to live anymore. Then it's just all nonsense and self-deception. No. It's not how you imagine it to be. That's your mind and your biases fear-mongering to you. You see, every bias you have has a very good self-justification mechanism. The bias doesn't just live by itself. The bias is almost like an organism that lives inside your mind, like a parasite. It feeds off of you and it defends itself. And one of the ways that the parasite of rationality and science defends themselves is that they say that if you let go of me, then horrible things will happen to you. You will fall into self-deception and delusion and religious fanaticism and whatever else. Every bias behaves this way, if it's a nice, juicy, deep bias. Because if it didn't, you would have gotten rid of it a long time ago. These biases sap and drain your energy. They'll certainly fearmonger you, as in this case. So anyways, God is a mind that has no biases. And that is just equivalent to saying, guess what? Guess what I'm going to say? God is love. That's right. God is love. Now you can appreciate a little bit what God is love means. God is love is not some hippie wishful thinking saying. God is love means a mind with no biases. Guess what love is? Guess what absolute love is? The realization that there is no difference between anything. That's a technical definition of love. Love is not a human emotion or feeling like they taught you at school or in biology class. Love is the metaphysical realization that every difference in reality, including all the physical differences between all physical objects, is imaginary. So when you realize, when you become conscious enough and your mind becomes pure enough to realize that the difference between a kangaroo and a terrorist is imaginary, when you realize that that's an imaginary difference, then you can love the kangaroo and the terrorist identically. Because they are literally, physically fused and undifferentiated within your consciousness. At a physical level. I'm describing the most physical level. Really, it's more proper to call it a metaphysical. It's such a deep physical level, it's metaphysical.